The following presentation was recorded live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for the 22nd Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers. This is tape number 23, Voice 101, Calling with Confidence and Care.
My name is Jan Wilson, and please do call me Jan. I'm here to tell you a little bit about how your voice works. I'll be very honest with you, I know very little about square dancing. I did square dancing, I think, when I was in high school, not as part of my gym class, but as a special group that I was involved with, and we actually did do it for a convention someplace. However, what I do know the most about is your voice, not only your speaking voice, but also your singing voice. And in square dance calling, both of those come into play, I believe. Part of what I'd like to do today is to tell you how your voice works. I'll tell you that I'm very, very uncomfortable with a microphone with this thing. I hate it. I have one of those voices that sounds absolutely awful in a microphone. To tell you a little bit about myself, my training, so that you understand where I come from to help you. What this session is about is basically to help you become a better caller or to answer any of the questions that you have or problems that you have with your voice. And I really want to get very specific. Some people were asking me some very personal questions up front here that I don't think they wanted to be recorded or anything. But I still think that those are some of the things that everyone has a trouble with, has problems with, and I'm certainly very willing to talk about those. To tell you a little bit about myself, I've been a classically trained musician now for 20-some years. I was raised in a family that had classically trained musicians, and I've done Metropolitan Opera auditions and that kind of singing. My traditional singing that I do is with symphony orchestras, so I don't need a microphone, and I have to project my voice. But for a session like this, we do need to use microphones, etc. Believe it or not, the kind of training that I've had to do without using a microphone is the same thing that you have to do with a microphone for the kind of calling that you do for square dancing. We all have the same basic mechanism in our voice and our bodies, and that's something that a lot of times we don't really understand. There are lots of parts of the body of the singing mechanism that we really don't know how they work. You'll always hear people say things like, well, breathe from your diaphragm. Well, to most people, that means absolutely nothing. It's a big muscle in your stomach. And as far as I know, you can't put any air into a big muscle in your stomach. It'd be like breathing into your stomach. So that doesn't really work. So those are the things that I want to talk to you a little bit about today. To tell you a little bit about how the voice works. Many people who teach voice, and obviously I've taught all kinds of different voice people. I've taught country western singers, I've taught opera singers, I've taught a lot of theater students so that they really know how to use their voices on stage, etc. But I've never taught any square dance callers, so that's a little bit of a different twist for me. The way that your voice works is that you have these two tiny little vocal cords in your throat. Do you know where they're located? Just point to your neck and show me where they are. Okay, some people don't know quite where they are. If you take your two fingers, like this, and put them where your Adam's apple would be, or at the middle of your throat, and swallow. Do you feel something go up and down? Did you feel that? Okay. That's your larynx. Not your larynx, but your larynx. And within the larynx, there are these two tiny little bands of fiber called your vocal cords. And do you know about how long your vocal cords are? How big they are? Well, to hear some people sing, you would think that they're about 1 foot long. But obviously, I don't think you could get foot-long vocal cords in that throat. Most people's vocal cords, no matter what size your body is or what size your throat is, are usually about 3/4 of an inch to an inch long. That's not very long. And there are two of them, okay? Now, they're not just sitting there in your larynx, floating away with no attachment whatsoever. They're actually hooked up to your body through a system of muscles. So unfortunately, with singing, while people think that singing and calling and talking are really beautiful things that you can do, it's really a muscular action that takes place within your throat. It's a combination of muscular as well as having some air flying by that as well. Every time that you speak, you probably don't realize it, but you take a breath. Even though it's a little one, there's still a breath in there. And as I was studying to come and do this session with you, I found that the one thing that crosses over with every kind of singing that you do, whether it's for the square dance calling or classical singing for an opera stage or whatever, you have to have that breath behind it. That might be one of the things that boggles your mind a little bit whenever you're calling, because you might run out of air quite often. So not only do you have this mechanism in your throat that you have to deal with, which there are a lot of things that can happen to your throat. I mean, you can have a sore throat, you can have sinus problems, someone was telling me about. There are all kinds of things that can happen to those vocal cords because they're so little. All kinds of irritants in the air, fibers in the air, smoke in the air. I'm very happy to see that there's no smoking around because that really irritates my throat. But all those things have some kind of an effect on your throat, and they do, decrease your ability to give the best kind of voice product that you can. Now, whenever you do take this vocal cord, these two little vocal cords down, and you try to produce a sound, you inhale, right? Now, we already know that we don't put the air in the diaphragm in the body, right? So where do you put the air? In your lungs, exactly. You'd be amazed how many people I've taught voice, and they're standing there singing away, singing all kinds of things, and I'll say, where are you breathing? Well, I have this huge diaphragm in my stomach, and I just draw all the air in with my diaphragm, and I use diaphragmatic control when I breathe and when I sing. I think, well, your diaphragm is just like the muscle in your arm, so you're not going to get any air in that. That's not the way it works. Truly. You do have to use your lungs, and the lungs are where the air is stored, right? Okay. Now, you're all going to do some exercises here in a little bit, so be prepared. Once that air is in your lungs, it's under pressure. The air comes in through the windpipe and down into your lungs. And believe it or not, that diaphragm, which is the big muscle under your rib cage. Now, here's another thing you have to do. This is a touchy-feely kind of a session. Take your fist, and you know where your ribs come together, where they would do the Heimlich maneuver or where they do CPR? Well, put your fist right there and go, All right. Once is enough. Did you feel that? That was your diaphragm. Coughing is a natural reaction of the diaphragm. And actually, a lot of people, if they're injured in accidents or whatever, if that diaphragm, if that large muscle is injured, that can be fairly catastrophic because it's one of the main pumps, or it provides a lever for allowing that air to come into your lungs. The vocal cords are normally shut. They kind of look like this in your throat. Actually, I've seen videos of them, and they're really awful to look at. But they're kind of shut like this. As soon as you inhale, the vocal cords open up, and air fills your lungs. Now, the trick to being able to have a really, really deep breath and a really good breath is to really use that diaphragm, believe it or not. Now, you'll notice there are some times that people take a breath, and all that you see are their shoulders rise. Okay? Now, if I put my fist at my diaphragm, you can do this with me, and if I take a big, deep breath, and I don't let that diaphragm do its work, what happens? It pulls in. Did you feel that? Did you notice my shoulders go up and my diaphragm pulled in? Well, if I take a truly good breath, the way that we use the diaphragm, or diaphragmatic control to breathe, that diaphragm will actually lower. Can you try that? And we'll have a bunch of hyperventilating people here in the room any minute now. These are very difficult exercises for people to do, and singers do this all the time. This is one of the big control factors that we learn to use. Another thing that we don't talk about a whole lot, probably in your profession with what you do, is your posture, because what's on top of those lungs? What sits on top of the lungs? You didn't know this was going to be an anatomy lesson, did you? Trick questions. Your rib cage, exactly. And your rib cage is very, very heavy, right? We're talking about bone here. So if you're standing like this and trying to do your calls, or if you're sitting and you're all slouched over, you're not going to get the maximum amount of air in your lungs that you need to. Okay? So posture is very important. I see some of you sitting in your chairs like this. You'll need to sit up very, very straight and square your shoulders. And believe it or not, that kind of thing won't make you look as if, you're trying to be an opera singer or something. It's just good posture. And it will make you feel better about what you're doing, because you really do need to fill those lungs with a lot of air. Okay? Now, I'd like you to all stand up because I want to do a few exercises with you. You didn't think you'd have to do this either. Try to see if you can. I don't want to stand up on the podium because I hate podiums as well. All right? Now, take that fist and put it at your diaphragm area, okay? Or we'll call it the rib area, all right? And I just want you to do a few things with me. Take a huge breath. I'll do it first, and then you can follow. I want you to take a huge breath and just do this. Ha, 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 ha. Can you do that? Go. Good. You all sound like Santa Clauses. Good. Now, I want to do one other exercise with you because this will really show you the kind of strength that you have to have within the muscle structure of your body to make all of this work. Once again, now don't do it yet, I want you to take a nice deep breath. Try to watch that your shoulders don't rise a whole lot, because if they do, you're only using the upper portion of your lungs. Your lungs have different regions in them, different sections, and we want you to use the entire lung. So as you do this, you're going to take a huge breath, and I want you to just blow the air out as if you have a tiny, you know those little straws they have at the bars? Tiny, tiny little straws. I want you to just blow it out like this. Now, I could do that for a long while, but I don't want to, okay? Now, take a good deep breath. Put your fist at that diaphragm area again. Shoulders back. Good posture. Both feet flat on the floor. A good deep breath. And now concentrate on yourself as you're doing this. See how long that you can go. The diaphragm should be moving in and getting tighter. It's contracting. Good. Do you feel it? Once you run out. Okay, nobody faints on the floor. All right, there's some show-offs in the room. No fair, no show-offs allowed. They're collapsing in the back. All right, let go of the air. Someone's turning very red in the face. Is there a doctor in the room just in case we need one? All right, that's the kind of air that you actually need to do a good sense of calling like you do, or to sing a good note, all right? Believe it or not, as I listened to the recordings that I did before I came to this session, I thought, gosh, they have to take really incredibly long breaths of air. And to me, that would be the most difficult thing about doing calls. Not only the words that you have to say and all that, because that's very foreign to me since I don't really understand it a whole lot, but it's understanding how you have to extend that breath that's so very important. How many of you fall or lose a lot of air whenever you're doing the calls and you find yourself out of breath? Raise your hands. That's probably the number one complaint of not only singers but callers as well, I would imagine. Now I want you to do one other thing. That little exercise that we did has one other little aspect to it, and it's what happens once you're finished with the breath. Because you know that you fill your air, you fill your lungs with air, you feel the diaphragm contracting, and you feel it pulling in, right? And what happens immediately when you stop blowing that air out? It relaxes again, and what does it do? It allows air to fall back into your lungs again. All right? Now, I want you to do the exercise. Some of you are going, oh, my gosh, wait, this is too much. I can't do all of this. Well, you can. And it's something, believe it or not, you do this every day. You're doing it right now without even thinking about it, right? Because you're breathing. It's just that when we try to do calling or when we try to do singing, we're extending that breath much, much more. All right? Now, I want you to take that breath again. The fist at the diaphragm, we could call it the stomach, but we'll call it the diaphragm, is very, very important. Nice and low. Okay, if you can't find it, just cough, and you'll find where that muscle is. Got it? Okay. Luckily, you're not a bunch of children, or this would be really bad. All right, I want you to take the breath one more time. Blow it out. Wait. Blow it out through the straw. Remember not to raise your shoulders a whole lot. But when you're finished with all that air, when you feel the diaphragm pulling in and contracting, and you just can't stand it another second, notice what happens at that point. Notice what happens, because that's the key to allowing more air into your body. All right? Okay, take the deep breath, inhale, and through the straw. Good posture as you're doing this. Now remember to think about what happens after you're done with the air. What does your body do? There's still a lot of show-offs. I think you should all have opera careers. I really do. Or else we have a bunch of windbags in the room. There's that possibility as well. There we go. Okay, sit down. Have a seat. What did you feel whenever that let go? What did you feel within your body? You felt it go out? Did you feel your throat open up? Okay? That's another thing. Well, that's something else that people talk a lot about in singing. My throat has to be open when I'm singing. Well, I'm sorry, but your vocal cords have to be vibrating together, so there's not going to be any open throat in there. Okay? You should have felt that diaphragm pull back out again, and what happened to your lungs? They automatically filled up with air, right? And that's really, believe it or not, the key to being able to sing a lot or to call a lot. All right? Because you constantly fill up those lungs with air. And believe it or not, what you're doing when you do that is you're pressing the rib cage outward. Now, truly professional singers like myself, one of the things that I always have to do is to be thinking about the muscles in my back. And it's always kind of funny to me because, you know, you always see these big opera singers on stage and they're usually big and fat and, oh my God, you think there's not a single muscle in their body. Well, there really is, and that's what they're working on. They're working on the rib cage muscles and the back muscles to pull the rib cage out and hold it there and only allow a small stream of air to come through to use that. Now, I want to do one other exercise, and this one you have to pick partners. Okay? You're not going to be dancing. You're not going to be calling. Just pick a partner anywhere in the room. There you go. All right. Let's stand up one more time. I'm going to get up on the podium so you can see me do this one. Okay. Find your partner and face them. Don't bow to your partner, but you can do that if you want. Oh, find a partner. You have to find someone. Does anyone not have a partner? Okay, go find a partner. You have someone? There's one more there that doesn't have a partner. Well, sure. Come on up. You can be my partner.
Everybody.
What the heck? I'm single and carefree. What do I care, right? Okay, come on up here. Now, the one partner needs to actually turn around. I was going to have you face each other to start, but let's turn around. That's it. Now, shh. This is very important. From behind, I want your partner to take their open palms, all right, and place them on the lower rib cage of your partner in front of you. Now you'll be fine. You won't catch any diseases or anything. There you go. Right there. Okay? See, you thought this was going to be boring, huh? No. Very touchy-feely. I like the touchy-feely kind of a session myself. Now, what I want the person in front to do is to try that exercise that we just did. But the person who's behind, I want you to really press on that rib cage. Take a good grip. I mean, you don't know this person. You're never going to see this person ever again in your life. Well, unless it's your husband or wife or whatever, okay? Now, what's your name? John. Ah, John is my friend here, and he's going to demonstrate with me, obviously. Okay, we're going to turn sideways. Now, John's going to press really hard. Actually, there you go. Okay. Now, John, you're going to tell people what you feel when I take a breath. What'd you feel? He must have liked that.
Okay, you feel it expanding on the top part of the handhold, and I don't know.
Okay, now what I want John to do is this. Do it again. Okay, now press again. You can come a little bit further around. There you go. Okay, careful now. I'm getting very friendly. I'll blush here in a minute. I probably am already. Now, what I'm going to do is that little exercise that we did by blowing the air out through a straw. I'm not going to do it as long. I'm not going to be a show-off and do it as long as all of you. But I'll do it for a little while, and I want him to see what goes on with my rib cage when that happens, okay? Don't press too hard. I'll be bruised. Here we go. There you go. What did you see?
Okay, the rib cage stays out, but is the diaphragm or below the rib cage starts to come in.
Exactly. That's exactly the point of it. My rib cage stayed extended. All right? Whenever I filled my lungs up with air, I pushed the rib cage out, and I keep that there. All right? Now, this takes some coordination. I want you to try this. The partner in front needs to take a breath. Now listen up. Put your hands on that rib cage. All right? The person in front is going to take the breath, all right, and blow it out the way we did. Now press on that side. Press on the rib cage so they can feel it. Do you feel that?
Your rib cage is going in.
Don't let the sides go in. Okay, let's stop a second. Now this is hard. This is very difficult to do. All right. Now try it one more time. This time, press the person who's in front doing the inhaling. Keep that rib cage extended. Don't let it collapse automatically. If you let it collapse, you're letting too much air out, and you're not using good breath control. This takes really a lot of muscle control to do this. It really does. Okay? Try it once again. Press on the rib cage. A good inhalation. Now, what you should also be feeling, the person in front should be feeling that diaphragm pulling in. Right? That'll be collapsing. Now I'm going to do it to John.
Yeah. 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 We have to think about it. Yeah. We have to keep concentrating on it the whole time.
All right, now trade, turn around, and let the other person have their time. Do you understand that this is the diaphragm here is what has to be pulling in whenever you're doing this to the sides? Okay. You can actually get behind one of the people and do it from behind there. Okay. All right. Shh. Now this takes some concentration. Do it one more time. One more time. A good inhalation, letting the air out gradually. Okay? Now you should all be very lightheaded and tired. Have a seat. All right, now. This is allergy time for me. Now, what I'd like you to do, since you just did that with your partners, and since we do need to put this on the tape, I'd like any of you that really had a really good sensation there, come up to the microphone. Come up to the microphone if you have any questions about how that was done or why that was done. Or if it worked. Did it work? Yes.
Extend your rib cage out there in order to keep it out. Then when you're trying to breathe and move this in and out, you can't seem to move it very much.
Right. Well, you won't be moving the sides in and out. That's the whole point of this. What you do move in and out is the diaphragm. Okay? As you're doing that, you want to keep the rib cage expanded, but you want to allow that diaphragm to move the air in and out for you. So really, believe it or not, in essence, when a classically trained singer goes on stage and sings with an orchestra or whatever, or even truly country western people or anything, if you're any kind of a performer that performs without one of these, without a microphone, your whole big thing is projection, getting the most amount of air that you can in your lungs to make the best sound that you can. And when they go on stage, that rib cage is extended almost the entire time. You'll find that opera singers can sing a 4-hour opera because they don't have the wear and tear on their vocal cords. That's not where the wear and tear happens. You'll find that they'll be physically tired, their backs will hurt, they'll want a massage, they'll be very tired in that sense, but not the vocal cords, because we haven't put any stress. Have we talked about your vocal cords? Not at all. Your vocal cords are something that happen. I mean, that sound that comes out of your vocal cords, happens because of all of this mechanism that you're doing below it. It truly does. And unfortunately, with a lot of us, if we haven't had any training in singing, we tend to think that those vocal cords are the main focal point of what's going on. If you learn nothing else from this session, if you learn nothing else from me, or from any other voice teacher that you study with, know this, that your vocal cords mean very, very little. If you're having trouble with your voice, it's usually what's happening below the throat. It's not usually in the throat itself. Not usually. Unless you... Yeah, there's a question. You have to come to the microphone.
Deborah Parnell, California.
Yes.
When my teacher was describing how to get that breath, because you want to get the biggest, deepest breath that you can.
Right.
I have to visualize the air going in, and he says, pull that air all the way down to the pubic bone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and he says everybody knows what that is and where it is, and they can always visualize that right away. So pull that all the way down and then feel it go around in the back to fill every vacuum, every cavity that there is.
Right.
The visualization idea works very well for me.
Good. That's something that a lot of people use that. And once again, she hasn't said anything about her vocal cords. That's not what she's talking about. She's talking about the mechanism of the air below it. Because that's what controls your voice, not your vocal cords. Our vocal cords are all the same, believe it or not. I mean, some men's vocal cords are a little bit thicker than women's. They might be slightly longer. That's why you have deep, low voices. Females have slightly smaller, thinner vocal cords, and that's why we can sing the higher notes that you guys can't sing. But when we're talking about producing the amount of air that you can, getting the most amount of air that you can in your lungs, the posture is important. Any kind of visualization that you can use, granted, is important. But most of all, remember your lungs. Like I say, if you learn nothing from me today, think about your lungs. I don't even care if you think about your diaphragm. Your diaphragm is in your body to work automatically without your help whatsoever. You don't have to say, okay, diaphragm, go down. I can't do that. I mean, it doesn't work that way, all right? A vacuum is created, air flows into your lungs, and it's how you control that air that really allows the amount of space that you have or the amount of time that you can produce a sound, okay? That's the important thing. Now, one of the things that was brought up before we were actually starting this session was a discussion on voice teachers. And I do want to get to some questions as well. So if I go a little long on anything, please say, yo, Jan, let's get to some questions. I wouldn't also mind doing some demonstrations today, having some of you. I brought some recordings with me. If some of you would like to volunteer and we can kind of do some critiques, that's always a big help for people. But one question came up about voice teachers. I can honestly tell you that there are very few classically trained singers in the United States. I couldn't give you a percentage, but very few who would really understand anything about the profession that you people do. We talk about a whole different aspect. When you study voice like I have, you learn languages. I can sing in 4 languages and understand them. I learn how to project my voice. I learn all kinds of different things. But the one thing that we do share, there are 2 things really that we share in common. The breathing aspect of it, because that's important no matter what kind of singing or calling you're doing. It doesn't matter what it is. If the breath isn't right, the product isn't going to be right. The sound you produce isn't going to be right. But the second thing that we all share, and this is very critical in your profession as well as mine, is diction. If I don't understand what you're singing, or if an audience doesn't understand what I'm singing, I'm not going to get hired again, and I won't get paid. And you all know what that's like. The kind of calling that you do, the kind of singing that you do, there are all kinds of different regionalized dialects that you have, all kinds of accents from being all over the country, etc. Those are things that you have to deal with. But the absolute diction of what you're saying is so very important. That comes from just doing a lot of singing and really understanding what you're singing about. If you don't understand what you're saying, other people aren't going to understand it either. Now, you do have the advantage because you have a microphone in front of you. That's a big advantage. I mean, imagine if you didn't have a microphone and you had to really speak like this. You'd really have to over-enunciate. And that's very important. But you'll find that if you have the breath underneath it, and you understand the breath, and you can work the breath the way that you need to, the diction will actually be a lot clearer because you won't be struggling for air all the time. That's important. Now back to about voice teachers for a second, because I kind of sidestepped that. As I said, very few of them would understand what your concerns and cares are about your voice for calling. Some of the things that you would always want to talk to a voice teacher about is the breathing aspect of it. Because you have to sustain your breath just as much as an opera singer or any other kind of a classically trained singer does. Okay? The extension and the sustaining of that breath is very, very important. The diction aspect of it is something they can always work on you with, no matter where you're from in the country. And we do all kinds of exercises in singing for that. I don't know that any of the ones that I know would really be of much help to you. But what would probably help is to hear some people to see how they could actually enunciate a little bit more. Believe it or not, what you hear with your own voice is not what we hear. Every time I hear myself over a microphone, I think, oh my God, this is not what I think my voice sounds like. Anytime you use the amplification of a microphone, you're going to get a different kind of a sound. That helps a little bit with your diction. But once again, you have to be very, very clear about what you're doing with your diction. If you ever need to try to find a voice teacher, and oftentimes, have any of you ever really studied voice with someone or studied what you do? Okay. Some of you have. It's very important to try to find someone who is obviously accredited through a university or a college. This way you can be sure that these people have trained specifically in voice. What you'll find in most communities, and this is the same in my community, I'm from central Pennsylvania. It's not a terribly well-known arts area of the United States, not like Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. But there are all kinds of people who have maybe taken a course in music, or maybe, say, the local band director took a course in voice, or he took a semester of voice lessons. I'm sorry, that doesn't qualify you to teach voice. If you look for a voice teacher, find out if they have a 2 or a 4-year degree, preferably a 4-year degree in voice from an accredited college. There are lots of them out there who want to teach voice lessons. There are also a lot of quacks out there, which you're only going to be wasting your money. Trust me. And use your good judgment on that. You've already had this session, and I've told you what. Your breath is important. You know how your breath works. There's no magical cure. No one on this earth can say to you, aha, I have the magical cure for your voice, for how you should sing better or how you should call better. That person doesn't exist. They just don't. And if they do, and they tell you they do, they're quacks. They probably also have a little crystal ball in the back room or something as well. So don't believe them. Usually average for voice lessons, I mean, if you want to pay for voice lessons, if you're in a small community, anywhere from $10 to $15 to $20 for a half hour or a 45-minute session is quite reasonable. In larger cities, be very careful. You're going to find a little bit more trouble finding someone who will take you seriously. Unfortunately, singing is one of those things that's an elitist occupation. And people tend to think that if you're square dance callers, you're not really elite enough to do that. Well, they'll take you for everything you have. Find someone who understands your art form. It's a very important art form in this country, and I've learned a lot just understanding the things that I've done for this session. But find someone who will give you a reasonable price for what you're going to do. Either that, or sometimes community colleges offer a voice class, etc., in the evening for adults. Those are usually a safe bet, too, because they're related to a college, and the people will be accredited. So that's a way that you can find some teachers. There is an association called NATS, the National Association of Teachers of Singing. I'm a member of NATS. Most of these people are professionals in the field. However, NATS is one of those organizations that you don't really have to be qualified to join. I shouldn't tell you that, but it's true. You could take a semester in voice, pay your dues at NATS, and be a member. So be very careful about that. Find out about the person, find out about their training. Not only that, but when you're choosing a teacher, find out if the person has had any experience in doing teaching other than classical training. I've had lots of theater training. I've had lots of students go on and be in off-Broadway productions. I've had students be in Civic Light Opera here in Pittsburgh. So that kind of experience is a little bit different for people. Be very, very careful that you just don't go with a classically trained musician, or they'll have you doing those stupid Italian songs and arias that everyone hates. They will do you no good whatsoever. No good at all. Okay, I kind of not at a loss as far as where we want to go, but I think what I'd like to do right now is to take some questions. What we might do, I think, is this afternoon, there's another session of this. If any of you want to join into that, I think we'd probably like to get into more of the interaction with some individual people getting up here. Now, you'll have to excuse me if I don't have the correct kind of records or anything. I did go to the local person who's a caller in our community. He gave me some records. They're probably very basic, but I'm sure you can do them. But I'd still like to do some one-on-one with people maybe this afternoon. Right now what I'd like to do is to answer some of your questions, and I'm sure there are probably a lot of them. But you'll have to go to the microphone.
Dan Irwin from Michigan.
Yes.
In singing calls, we're quite often going from a singing voice to, especially if it's a complicated figure, a very choppy, precise speaking oratorial voice. Personally, I find that hard. I don't find hard going to the oratorial back to the singing voice. I have trouble finding my note or making the transition.
What, you do have trouble finding your note?
Yeah, coming back.
Okay. One of the things that I found in listening to the recordings that I listened to was that you have a basic chord pattern for the most part in a lot of the calls that you do, and it's a 1-4-5-1 call pattern. Now, this is getting into a little bit more of specific information about music theory, but there are chord progressions that you use. If you really listen for chord progressions and where they head, you'd really see that most of them do go in that progression, and that'll help you a little bit. The more you listen to them, the more you'll hear a pattern. And try to listen to some calls that are actually of the same ilk. Now, I listened to several different ones. I listened to one that was I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, which is very, very different from the traditional kind of call that I've always listened to, or that I've even participated in when I did it. That one takes a lot of talent because you've got to not only do some speaking and some singing and some calling, you have to also fit it in with what that song is doing. And that's difficult. I mean, I truly admire you for being able to do that. I couldn't do that. I really couldn't. It would take some work to do that. But I would listen to some more of the traditional type calls and work your way into finding those chord progressions through that, because that'll help you find your note a little bit more easily, I think. Going from the singing to the speaking is a whole other thing. As far as the mechanics of it go, you're still using the same kind of mechanics that you would if you were just singing. You still have to have the breath there. Whether you go into a really smooth progression from one to the other is something that you just have to work out and practice, I think. Because I don't think there's any real, I don't think there's any mechanical way for me to tell you how to do that. You just have to keep practicing how to do that. Yes?
Okay, I have a two-part question. You had us expand our rib cage, but when I did that, it felt like I had to breathe in more often than before.
You know why?
What?
Because what do you do for a living? May I ask?
I work in a hospital on medical equipment.
Okay. Do you sit most of the day?
No, I stand and walk around most of the day.
Well, that's good, because I would have thought that you sit. One of the problems that we have whenever we try to do this kind of breathing is that we're mostly sedentary. If you counted the amount of hours of the day that you actually sit or the amount of days that you actually walk around or exercise, the sedentary usually beats out the others. Because of that, the muscles of our rib cage that line not only the inside and the outside of the rib cage, but the muscles in between the ribs, they are not very well in tune. I mean, it's something that has to be worked on, and it's something that you really have to exercise. By doing a lot of singing, not calling necessarily, but just even putting your favorite record on. I always find that people have questions about how you can practice when you don't take lessons, you don't have a piano. I don't know how to practice. I don't have anything to practice with. Sometimes when I'm not singing a whole lot, trust me, I never sing a note. And I'll go for weeks at a time where I don't sing a note. And all of a sudden, if I have a performance coming up, I say to myself, okay, get your favorite songs out. Just sing with them. And I start singing some things that are really familiar to me. I put some records on that I really like. But I don't do it to please myself or to make a good sound or anything. I do it to get the mechanics of my voice working again. Because if I haven't been singing for a couple of weeks, those muscles are lacking again, and I have to get them in tune again. So what you have to do is just do a lot of singing and exercise that rib cage. I mean, one of the things that I sometimes have sessions do is to put, either a string or a belt or some kind of a rope or something around your middle, and you pull it and you hold it. And that's a way that you can get your rib cage to actually move. Now, if you did that, if you went home, say, and put 5 of your favorite records on, put something around your middle and pulled that so that you actually felt your rib cage expanding, you're going to find that by the time you're done, you're going to be a lot better at it than when you started.
What I used to do was concentrate on filling this area, which is maybe just below the rib cage, and then that's how I did it in the past.
Well, the only problem with that is, where did we say the air has to go?
Into your lungs.
Yeah, and where are your lungs?
Up here. In other words, I'm filling my stomach more. Is that what I'm doing?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. I mean, you might be filling the lower section of your lungs, the lower lobe of your lungs, and that's only going to get you so much air. Okay? I've always been taught, in a lot of the teachers that I've had, not to see my chest rise at all. Well, I'm sorry, but my lungs are in there, my rib cage is in there. You're going to see my chest rise when I take a breath. All right? That's the danger. People say, use your diaphragm. Well, if I only used my diaphragm, or if somebody told me that and I didn't know anything about singing, all you'd see is this big stomach push out. There'd be nothing into the lungs at all. I mean, you can do that. Put your finger at your diaphragm and just push. I can do it and not have a single bit of air come into my body. Okay? And that's a danger. I mean, you don't want to just fill up down here. Remember, the air goes in your lungs. The diaphragm is a very large dome-shaped muscle that aids in the pulling in of that air into your lungs. Okay?
Okay, the second half of my question is when I do that and try to keep my rib cage out, which I was able to do,
right,
then I have a lot of tension up here.
Yeah.
Which means that I'm not relaxed anymore, and that's going to affect my voice. It's going to make it sound strained or whatever.
No.
Well, at first it will, until I get used to doing that for a long time.
Right. But the thing that you have to find about breathing this way is that you're not straining your neck muscles at all.
But I have this tension down here. And
you're going to because you haven't used
makes me unrelaxed. In other words, now I'm going from being relaxed in my posture and singing to being kind of tense.
You're going to feel a certain amount of tension because what you're doing is you're pulling on the muscles. Okay? And believe it or not, there isn't a single form of singing or calling or whatever that doesn't create tension. That's what you have to do. You have to create a little bit of tension in that rib cage. The relaxation part of it, I mean, if I was as relaxed as I wanted to be, let's say I took a Valium pill and I just kind of and tried to sing, I couldn't do it. Because the brain has to tell these muscles to do something, all right? And you really do have to stretch them to their limit. Relaxation is a whole, I don't know. Sometimes I think, gosh, I see some singers on stage and they're just doing all these wet dish rag kind of relaxation things. And I think, gosh, I like to have lots of energy and be full of energy. And if I have a little tension with that, that's fine. But what that doesn't do is put any strain on my voice because I haven't touched any of these muscles. None of this. The danger is if you do this. If you take that big deep breath and see your neck doing this, then the minute you see these muscles pulling, you're going to feel tension.
I sing in the choir, so we talk about voice placement and stuff like that. If I'm tense down here, I'm not going to have a tendency to open my throat either and let it out. It would be kind of tense in here.
Remember, there's one thing you cannot do, and that is open your throat. Right. You can't. If someone says to you, open your throat and sing.
Well, we're open our vocal. Whatever we're doing, we need to relax this area because if we strain it, I know what happens to the notes.
Well, exactly. But you're going to find that if you take the breath in your lungs and allow that diaphragm to control that air, you're not going to strain your throat. That's what opera singers do all the time, and they never lose their voices, very rarely. The minute you allow that air to be uncontrolled and only using a portion of your lungs, a small portion of your lungs, that's when you're going to see that you're going to get tense. Either that or if you take a breath that's very high in your lungs, like we first did, with the shoulders raised and there's nothing going on down here, like that, then your throat's going to be tense. It's just an exercise process that you have to go through to make it feel better as you're doing it.
I'll have to work on that quite a bit.
Yeah, you do. Actually, you do. I mean, trust me that what I tell you in this session, you're not going to walk home and say, "Ooh, now I can do it." That doesn't happen. It takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of work. It really does. Any other questions? I know, on the mic. Okay. He was asking about projection. How do you really project your voice? You're going to find, no matter what you're doing, once again, it's all a matter of that breath control in your lungs. If you have a lot of air in your lungs and the entire lung is filled with air and you're using the diaphragm in the proper way by just allowing it to do its work, you'll project very, very well. Now, sometimes that has to do with the size of your vocal cords as well. If you've got very small vocal cords, you're not going to be able to project that much. That's why you use a microphone. Okay? But with that big flow of air behind you, you can project very well. Yes?
How would you tell a person to take in a lot of air real quick?
Well, that's something we didn't do in that little session that we did. And that's the tricky part about this, because when I listened to the recording, I thought, gosh, they only have like a millisecond to get air, and then they have to do this great big long phrase again. And that's difficult. Once again, this is something that you can practice at home, if you have a partner at home or something, by doing that. And actually this afternoon session we'll actually see some of that take place. But I want to see some people take that good deep breath, use it as much as they can, and then remember when we finish the exercise, I said the important thing is that thing that happens afterwards. Allowing that diaphragm to let go and allowing the air to flow back in your body. And believe it or not, it's the trick of getting that down really, really fast that's the key to that. And that's hard. That's why you take voice lessons for years and years and years. Yes?
My name's Chris from Atlanta, Georgia, and I have two questions. The first of all is part of training.
Yes.
I would like to develop a little bit of a vibrato technique. Sometimes I fall across it by accident. It sounds good, and I'd like to do it on purpose once in a while.
Right.
And that's the first question.
Well, vibrato is one of those mystery things that we all have. How many of you use some vibrato when you do some calling? Accidentally or whatever. Okay. Vibrato is, like I say, a mystery thing. And believe it or not, once again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's the breath control underneath it that allows that vibrato to happen. Yeah, it does. And actually, it's partly the diaphragm, and it's also the movement of the air through the vocal cords that creates the vibration. And that's something that takes a voice training one-on-one. I'm not going to tell you right here how to do vibrato with your throat because we'll have people walking around doing turkey gobbles all day, which I don't want that. That would be a danger. I can see it. But that's something you need to work on specifically with a voice coach.
Okay, and the second question is almost inevitably every fall I get a cold, cough, sore throat, and with the calling that I do 4 or 5 nights a week, it's impossible to get healed unless I hire outside help and come do my stuff. How can I heal my throat or my vocal cords or whatever is damaged quickly to where I can continue calling?
Okay. This is an area that I have lots of experience in. I traditionally get a cold about the end of April, and traditionally every year I have a big performance that I have to do, like a Beethoven Ninth or something like that, which is a big work. I think for 4 years running, I had a performance on April 30th, and I had a cold every single year. Last year, I made my debut at Carnegie Hall, and I prayed on my knees that I would not get that cold, and I didn't. So I don't know how I did it. If you're calling that much, 4 or 5 times a week, that's very strenuous on your voice. I would advise that if you do that much, try to find are very, very small. They're very, very delicate tissue. They're not like rubber bands. They will wear out. And a lot of people do develop vocal nodules or calluses on their vocal cords, and that can happen quite easily. I've had a tiny nodule that was no bigger than if you took a pen and touched it to a piece of paper. No bigger than that, and yet it rendered me useless for a year and a half. I was not allowed to speak. I was not allowed to sing. And I was a mental case. It was terrible. I would first of all advise that you not talk during the day, if you can help it at all. The second thing is, if you're going to take any kind of drugs, be very, very careful of decongestants. Decongestants, yes, will dry out your sinuses, and they'll stop that flow of mucus from your nose down your throat. But believe it or not, you need that. That's why your throat gets sore, because the throat has dried out. If you must take a decongestant, I mean pour on the liquids like you've never drunk before. Just drink and drink and drink and drink and drink. Constantly, if you're a professional caller and you do as much as he does every week and you don't have a bottle of water or a glass of something sitting beside you while you're doing this every night, you're crazy. I mean, there is no way. What do you think opera singers do? As soon as they go off stage for a second, they guzzle. I mean, anything to keep that liquid going. Concerning lozenges or anything like that, we all have taken those Hall's cough drops. Be very careful. They have menthol in them. Menthol traditionally dries things up. There's a better kind on the market called Ricola. It's a Swiss-made product that has lots of herbs in it. That's a better product really for you to use, because all that it does is keep moisture in there. All right? You don't want to dry out the throat. Hall's cough drops will do that. Chloroseptic spray in your throat, don't go near it. If you have a bottle of chloroseptic spray at home, throw it away. If you want to damage your voice, keep it. The danger that people have whenever they use that stuff is all that it does is numb your throat. It numbs the back of the throat, so you can't tell if you're damaging your throat or not. Sure, you don't feel anything, but you're creating damage there. And it's damage that'll take a long time to heal. Okay? Warm liquids obviously are better. My voice teacher always told me to have a glass of wine before I drank. If I had a glass of wine before I drank, I'd be on the floor. I couldn't do that. She always had a shot of whiskey. Well, I couldn't do that either. I mean, whatever works for you. This is something that, every opera singer has some kind of formula that they use. Some of them use lemon in their tea tea dries out my mouth, so I don't like to use tea. Any performances I do, you always see a Diet Pepsi on the stage beside me, and people are like, oh, how do you do that? Don't you burp? Well, sure, but not when I'm singing. So any kind of liquid that you find that works well for your throat, use it. But always have some kind of a lozenge there. If you go to do these calls 4 or 5 times a week, and you don't have lozenges and some kind of liquid beside you, you're asking for damage, whether you use a microphone or not. Cold or hot liquids, if you have a sore throat and the throat is really inflamed, I would use a warm liquid, not terribly hot, but a warm liquid. And lemon does help, actually. There are some healing qualities in lemon that are good for that. Once again, the hot liquids are going to create more mucus from your sinuses that will drain down your throat. It's gross. You need it, honestly. The last thing you want is a dry throat. You need the mucus going through there. Now, so somebody says, well, geez, I've got all this mucus in my mouth and I can't get rid of it and everything. Either cough it up or swallow it, get rid of it somehow. I'd advise not coughing. Coughing is one of the most damaging things you can do to your voice because you're creating a really abrupt action at your vocal cords. Just swallow the mucus, get more liquid, try to flush it out that way, but certainly don't try to cough it up. Cold liquids I always like just because it's more refreshing in my mouth. I like carbonated drinks just because I think I'm addicted, but whatever works for you. Caffeine is very bad because for a lot of people it dries out the mouth and the throat. I've never found that it's had any effect on me because Diet Pepsi's full of caffeine. But for some people, caffeine is a problem. Once again, you've got to find some kind of a liquid that works best for you. Most voice teachers will tell you just get some bottled water and take that with you so that you have some water. But water I can't stand. I mean, it's boring. So whatever you can use. Yes.
Dan Prosser, Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. 2 questions. I had been told one time not to drink iced liquids because it does have the tendency to make this section of the throat cold and tighten up the muscle, which you don't want to do when you're, is that correct? Or room temperature or warm?
I don't know. I've eaten ice cream before I sing. It didn't affect it. Well, heck yeah. I mean, geez, I'm going to pass up chocolate ice cream? No way, no way. That really is something that's an individual thing. I always like cold liquids just because I'm accustomed to that, and I know that I can handle that. To me, that kind of clears up any of the mucus that's in my throat. It's something you have to judge for yourself. Obviously, if you drink a glass of milk and have some ice cream before you go to call, you might have a little mucus in there. You might want to wash it away. But I would not. I mean, there are no... Understand with your voice, there are no things that I can say, oh, don't use this, don't use that, except chloroseptic. That's really nasty stuff. If cold liquids bother your throat and you feel that your throat tightens, don't use them. But if you see somebody using, like if you saw me on stage with a glass of ice water or with ice cubes, just say, hey, it must work for her. I mean, listen to her. You know, if you see somebody with that, that's their deal. It's an individual thing. You have to work at that.
One other question. The biggest problem that callers seem to have is injuring or making their voice box or damaging the vocal cords.
Right.
Many records come out in a key that is not in the range that we are in, and we're either reaching or you can't reach. You're either reaching too hard or you can't drop underneath it. We vary the speed, which also changes the key. And is there some way, why can someone like an opera singer sing for 4 hours and we sing for 2 hours and at the end we say, man, I'm glad that's over?
Yeah. First of all, I can give you the experience of opera singers because I do an awful lot of work like that. We can sing for those extended periods of time and in the incredible ranges that we do because we work every day at exercising the muscles of the voice. We do exercises that stretch the range of the voice. And once again, we're talking about those 2 tiny little vocal cords. But by stretching the vocal cords and doing those exercises every day, that's how we increase our range. Now, if you're a caller and you don't pick up a microphone or you don't do any practicing at home before you go out to do your calling, you're crazy. I mean, calling is strenuous. I was amazed, honestly. I mean, when I first was asked to do this, I thought, piece of cake. No problem. I understand this. This is no problem. Well, then when I listened to some of the recordings, I thought, geez, you could easily damage your voice doing this. I mean, it is not easy. All the things that we've said so far, your posture, your breathing, all of that is extremely, extremely important. But also in connection with that is doing a good warm-up before you go to do this. I mean, and people will say, well, gee, do I have to do all kinds of exercises? No. You're not going to be doing opera exercises or anything like that or classical kinds of vocalises. Put on your favorite record. You can do this in your car on the way there. Sometimes when I go do an audition, rather than putting on the pieces that I'm going to be doing, I'll put Barbra Streisand on or something like that and just exercise my voice. But I'm not doing it, remember, for the pleasure of listening to that sound or myself. I'm thinking of the mechanics of how I produce that sound. It's the mechanics underneath your voice, your vocal cords that's important. The breathing aspect of it, I can't stress enough. That is so important. It's paramount. That's why opera singers can sing as long as they do. Because they have that breath down to a T. It's all we ever train for. I mean, 4 years of college working on a vocal degree was nothing but breathing. And I used to blow people away because I could hold notes longer than everybody else. I had a better range than everybody else. But I spent 5 hours every night in a practice room rather than out partying with my friends, learning how to use my mechanism better. 2 years of graduate degrees and advanced training over in London, added on to that. So that's why opera singers can do what they do. But you can follow the same things. Warm up, get your voice warmed up, get your brain warmed up, because if you're not breathing correctly and using that correctly, it won't work. And you will damage. Yes?
I have something I'd like to pass on to some people who might have problems. They got to project.
Right. Good.
In the past, I've been doing this for about 20 years, starting my 21st year. I've had problems with my voice as far as nasal drainage. My sinus drains all the time. In the past year, I've got involved in Shaklee products, Shaklee vitamins. I take an alfalfa tablet. I take 16 alfalfa tablets a day.
Oh, how can you do that?
Now listen now, these are natural vitamins.
Right.
They're natural vitamins. There's no synthetics or nothing in them.
Uh-huh.
And in studying these and learning about these, I found that it works with sinus problems, either allergies like you just talked about in the spring. I started with like 10 of these a day, increased to 12. I went to 16. I take 4 every 4 hours. Now, these are natural vitamins. They have no effect on you other than maybe they're like a LASIK. They might make you go to the restroom a little more often, but I have eliminated that big drainage all the time.
Okay.
My voice is stronger. This past winter, I went clear through the winter with 2 colds, which were very mild. Every time I got a cold, I lost my voice. This past winter, I had 2 colds. I never lost my voice once. And I find I can project. I have no problems when I'm calling. I got 4 tablets in my pocket right now. I'm ready for lunch.
I think you better set up a display out there so everybody can buy these.
I'm just passing this along as what I've learned in the past year. I've been doing this and had this problem for 20 years. I no longer have it because of these natural vitamins.
Okay. Just understand one thing, folks. And I'm not making fun of you, honestly. I think that's great that you use those. That's an individual thing that works well for him. I think if I took 16 alfalfa tablets a day, God knows what would happen to me. I mean, I don't have any idea. I take no vitamins whatsoever. I have probably one of the most unhealthy diets of any human being I know because I'm single, I work very long hours, and I rarely cook a meal, although I love to cook. Know your own body. Know what works for you. I know that sinus tablets make me woozy. I don't like the feeling they give me. Vitamins, I don't have the money to pay for vitamins, so I don't pay for vitamins. I won't take any. If they work for you, that's fine. But realize that if you have sinus drainage, you're going to have it. If you have it at certain times of the year, you're going to have it. Deal with it. Find something that works for you. There's no miracle cure that works for everybody. It just simply doesn't. It's not out there.
Yeah, you're right. And also, like I say, a bottle of these, 700 of these in a bottle for $21, which lasts you like a month and a half, taking the amount that I take.
Right.
And has no other effect on your body. They're not like sinus tablets that dry you up or something like that.
You've just found for some reason
it's a natural vitamin, and it works. And it's another thing you have to study and educate yourself. But if you educate yourself to these natural vitamins, you'll find they do work.
Right. Well, if that can work for you, certainly go for it. Like I said, whatever works for the individual is the best. Any other questions? I think we're just about done with the session, I have a feeling. No other questions? Okay. I encourage any of you certainly to join this afternoon. I'm going to do far less talking this afternoon, and there'll be much more participation this afternoon because I want to hear what you do, and I want to help individual people do what you do better. All right, if that made sense, I think it did. I thank you very, very much for